All right. Everybody hear me? Cool. So, thank you, everybody. First of all, it's been a really great day of talks, and so we've got Ray and Aaron through this together, and that's just fantastic. All the other speakers that showed up, it's been really cool. It's been a fantastic day. Got to learn a lot of stuff, so it's good. It's a very good use of a Sunday. So I only have a few slides, and then we'll get into some actual demo-y type stuff. I'll introduce myself really quick first. I'm actually I'm gonna pull off my monitor here so I can not echo in my own ears. So I was a developer first. I actually got into it really young. I was kind of elementary school age. Basically, almost as soon as I could write, I was bumming around the command line, and then a couple of years after that, started writing a bit of code here and there, starting with DOS batch files, and then VB and various other things. And sometime around the mid-90s, started putting stuff on the web because that was the thing to do then. Teaching myself, mainly starting with client-side stuff, HTML. I believe the CSS draft spec existed at the time, but that wasn't something I was even aware of. So we were doing everything with attributes inside the HTML elements as far as styling went back then. So I did that for a while. Done development for somewhere just shy of 15 years, I think, professionally. And then 2016, I packed up. I was in Toronto. I packed up and I moved down to South Carolina and took a job with a security company, Secure Ideas. His tagline is professionally able. Came on as a security consultant, basically kind of specialized in application security, and just kind of went from there. So most of what I do is penetration testing, but I also do security architecture reviews, and I do training when I can. So we do some for our clients. I go to conferences, B-sides and stuff, and do training, public classes, often really low cost or free. And in the process of that training, I found that there are some concepts that I just have a really hard time teaching to people. So that's kind of the problem. So I think CSurf was one of those I sort of noticed it with. We put together kind of a neat little comic strip for CSurf, and that worked pretty well. I was able to explain CSurf pretty well. But then we got into stuff like cores, cross-origin resource sharing. And if I just try to do it with slides, or I just try to map it out on a board or something, there was one class I taught at one point where I had two whiteboards. I made one of them the client, the other one the server, and I was writing all over them, running back and forth between these things. And I'm sure I looked like this to the class. Developers, it was developer security class, and their eyes just glazed over. And I could tell that they didn't think that I was making a lot of sense, even though I very clearly understood and knew the concept. And so after that kind of experience, I went back and went and made some visual aids, and they're open source, and that's kind of the main thrust of what I'm going to get into here. So I'm going to hop over. I'm going to switch to sharing a different window, and we'll do a little show and tell on those. Wrong one, right one. There we go. All right. So Some of you might have heard of Samurai WTF. So Samurai is it started as a Linux distro that was packaged up. And then there was a rewrite of it for version 4.0, which was a few years ago. And that was kind of when I got involved in the project. There was some groundwork done, and I picked it up and ran with it, and basically converted, instead of passing around and rebundling this VM, I bundled it up into a Vagrant thing based on some work that Jason, one of the other contributors, did. So did it as a set of build scripts, just Vagrant up, and it just builds the whole thing, and there you go. It's sometimes compared to like Kali for web, specifically for appsec. I don't really agree with that comparison. We use it as a training tool. We use it as a lab. It's also free open source. And so for that, but as a separate project, I built this called Musashi, kind of in keeping with the Samurai theme, sort of set of node applications for demonstrating stuff. And it started with cores, because cores was the thing that tripped me up. It was the thing where I found myself standing in front of this class, not able to convey this topic as well as I needed to. And I don't even think that was the first time. But that was the point where I realized, until I actually had a real demo for it, that explanation was going to kind of suck. So I did that. We'll close that. We'll look at this. By the way, I've got the GitHub link in my last slide. I'll throw it up right at the end. So I built this out. It's in that Musashi repo. It's actually, you notice the port's a little weird, 3021. There's a 3020. There's the cores, the CSP demonstrator is the other one that I'm going to get to today. That's on 3041. So I've actually got them all loaded up out of one file. You can't really cherry pick, so there may be some things to re-architect there. But so I threw this together. Actually, this will need to be 3020. There we go. So I'm going to run through kind of a hyperspeed walkthrough of how these work, and hopefully you find yourself in a position. Training has been a big theme today, right? It kept coming up all day. Jillian talked a whole lot about training. Obviously, that's what she does. She's excited about it. Nancy pointed out that one quote, right? It was, every developer is basically an application security engineer today, whether they want to be or not. And that was very much kind of into the theme of Ray's talk as well. I really believe that very strongly. We're slapping Band-Aids on things if all we're doing is dealing with them after they're in production. Training developers is one of the most critical, one of the most important parts, and just generally training people in any roles dealing with application security in terms of actually mitigating risk in kind of an aggressive, proactive sort of way. It's like the difference between changing your lifestyle and diet before you have a disease versus in response to it. This kind of fits in that same, it's kind of a dark metaphor, but yeah, simile. Anyway, so I've got this my web app here. There's a API interface. Normally, if I were doing it inside of Samurai, I would have host names on them, and I'd have it going through Nginx doing hostname based routing. It will work fine without that, except for this little toggle selector up here. It's got this regular expression option, and that pattern is currently hard coded to a specific host name. Anyway, so this basically changes the course policy of the API server for all of the requests except for this login one. Like, it doesn't care what credentials you put in. You just make some up. send it. Then it goes off and it shows a response there if it can. If you do a CORS violation, obviously it's not going to get the response object for anyone that's familiar with CORS violations. But it does that. So it makes that round trip. And if I pop open my developer tools, I was going to switch back and forth with Burp, but this is probably it's probably easier to stream, to be honest. So let's get that open. I'm going to send that. There we go. We got our login request. You can see that for the login request, it actually has those CORS headers in the response. So access control, allow origin, allow credentials. On any of the other requests, like this one here, this list items, this is just simple, basically CRUD operations through a REST API. Any of the other ones, it actually respects this toggle up at the top. And if it's same origin, it is not returning a CORS policy. Right? You can see that, you can demonstrate that, create these CORS violations at will. The response console here just says there was some sort of error, check your console, which is down here, just because it failed, right? If I swap that to reflected, then whatever my origin is, it will be reflected along with the allow credentials. And you can see that here. You can see the response, although it's an empty array in this case, and that's kind of how that works. Post is there, and you can put in JSON objects, and you can see the placeholder in there. Kind of gives away the structure. They need to have a name. Everything else is arbitrary. In this case, it was, so Nathan's one of my coworkers, and when I showed him this, he was worried that on the spot, in the heat of doing a developer training class or something, he's going to forget JSON, because web dev's not his background. Although he's capable of it. He's actually one of the most well-rounded technical people I've worked with. But anyway, he was afraid he's going to forget how to do JSON properly, and he's going to screw it up and be embarrassed. And so I put the placeholder in there where Nathan is a mailroom technician. Can I show chaining cross-site scripting with CORS? In this, no. Although, would you want to elaborate maybe on what you mean by that? Because normally if I have cross-site scripting on the same origin, I don't need to worry about CORS, unless you're talking about pivoting through other targets through the CORS policy. I'm just going to do just like the placeholder in here, really quick. Title. Tech. There we go. And if I didn't screw that up, let's see. It's the beauty of live demos, right? There we go. You can see there's a response message. We're reflecting the thing. And you can actually use this to demonstrate how. Yeah, okay. Looking over at the question in there, yeah. So if there's a whitelist for specific subdomains, then yes, if one of them is subject to cross-site scripting, it can attack through a CORS policy. I explained that. I don't have anything built into this demo that's specific for that. But the example I usually actually give for that one is if you allow all of your subdomains under your main domain because you're a SaaS product or something, this is your application, but you have a crummy unpatched WordPress blog at your blog.subdomain. That's usually the example I use. If I get cross-site scripting on that, I can use it to attack your proper application, right? So we created our dude. Nathan's a dude. We created him. There's an object. It's got a UID. And so one thing you can do with that one as well is, because that doesn't pre-flight, you can actually demonstrate how a non-pre-flighted one will cause him to get created anyway, even though we won't capture the response. I can't remember what odd terms I've heard used for that. I call it CSRF, because that's what it is. But I know I've heard some oddly contrived terms for it, and I messed up my copy and paste. And the reason I did that is because I never use my external keyboard with my Mac, and I use the wrong keys. There we go. Okay, so there we go. We've got his details. They come back. You can see some other artifacts from the DB in there. And how do I want to do this? If I toggle this back to same origin, I'll read the item details. That's going to fail. That's why that clear button's there. There you go. You can see it doesn't get populated. That one should have actually put the error message in there, but it doesn't. And that's also where you can do similar requirements here. It needs a name. It actually replaces it, so you can even change the name. I'm going to put in Brantley Foster. I don't know if anyone's going to get that reference. Nobody? All right. So Brantley Foster was a Michael J. Fox character that worked in a mailroom. It's an old movie. We do the update. The update gives you the opportunity to actually see is your options request with your pre-flight. And right now, because it respects the policy I did on the little toggle thing at the top, it actually came back with nothing, and no put request was actually sent. And normally, probably if if I was sharing the whole screen, then I'd actually do a lot of this stuff in Burp instead of the dev tools typically. But you can see it down here. That works pretty well. So that's kind of roughly it for the cores demonstrator. It's kind of a walkthrough. You can do all sorts of types of requests. You can do pre-flighted. You can do non-pre-flighted. You can reflect all the origins. You can go same origin and definitely cause a cores violation. Cookies are the only auth I have in there right now, but they're the most common, interesting one for cores policies. And the regular expression one in there, although it won't work without the hostname stuff, the regular expression one, first of all, that should be something dynamic that you can supply pretty soon. That's probably a priority change for me. The other thing about that one is it's intentionally flawed. And I can't remember if I did the front or the back of it. Normally it's like client.cores.dem is the allowed origin. I think it's the top level domain that I did as a not properly anchored pattern. So we talk about how a more real example of a .com and a .community are two top level domains that start with the same three letters. So if it's not anchored properly at the end, I can go ahead and register .community and use it to attack your .com. Same sort of thing applies to the front of the domain to an extent, right? If it's a subdomain and it's only subdomains and it's properly anchored, so it has to always be subdomains, then you're probably okay, as long as you control your whole domain and nobody else can host arbitrary stuff on it. But I've seen it where they don't put the dot in the pattern. And so you can just append arbitrary extra domain name to the start, and that works. So yeah, that sort of stuff. That's why that regex option is in there. Although right now it's not great. It would be much better if you could actually just give it an arbitrary regex, which, like I said, that's probably a near feature. I'm going to swap over to the CSP demonstrator. This one is sort of interesting because I wrote it after the cores one, but it is written in the style of much older kind of applications. So a lot of this follows, if anyone's familiar with that sort of post redirect get pattern applications, it's pretty close to those. Makes use of a lot of server-side templating. So it's got a set CSP page that sets it for the whole. It sets the CSP for the whole application. I just disabled it completely. So I go over here. I've got these two little places where I can do intentional. I can do, payloads. Yep. So the reflected one, yeah. So that one does a round trip to the server and gets incorporated, and it's down here, although there wasn't anything for you to see on that one. If I go into the inspector and go look at that area. There it is. Payload output is here. It's here, isn't it? There it is. I found it. Okay, so there it is. Little thing there. There's a DOM-based one as well. And the reason I like having the DOM-based one in there is not actually for a CSP thing. It's, let's make that 2 this time. It's to demonstrate that this doesn't work. Because it's DOM-based, it's just writing it at runtime, those scripts don't get evaluated. So instead, the old classic, it's on the OWASP cheat sheet. Oh, I probably didn't mention the Samurai WTF is actually an OWASP project as well, although it was once thought to be defunct. It is now considered live again. This Musashi side project isn't really technically listed anywhere under the OWASP material, but I don't know. So, by the way, there's a neat, if it's one you're not aware of, getting around the use of parentheses on cross-site scripting payload. Use backticks as long as it's a single argument that you're passing in. There you go. You can see that executes. So now we can play with the policy, right? We can change things. We can demonstrate that simply by doing a really tight default source self, which good luck getting your application to work in most cases if it's got any complexity with it that tight, but let's start with that. We do that, and we put our script tag in there. Do another one. You can see the content security policy blocking it. You can see that it didn't execute, right? That's something we can demonstrate. So that's there, that's cool. Just one other area of this that might be interesting for you, although it's, I don't know. So I've got these exercises. I did one of them originally, just one of them for a training class last November. Finally went and did a second one this morning. Brand new, fresh. So these, although this particular exercise doesn't really require one, there's a button here that sets the course policy to the CSP, content security policy, to the one intended for the exercise. And then it's a try to get execution, try to beat the CSP or evade it in some way. The first exercise is based on something we saw in an actual test a few years ago at this point, where CSP was blocking stuff. It needs some hints, I think, probably, and it really shouldn't be the first one that anyone starts with because it's a little more obscure. But if you look here, it's got this hidden box. There's a parameter that has the same name as this hidden box. You put it in the URL, it gets, I'm giving it away, but that gets written there in a way that's not escaped properly. So you can dangerously put content in there. The goal of the exercise is, and remember I'm on that default self one, redirect the login to this URL That's the challenge. And if you just want to know the solution, you can DM me on Twitter. I'll tell you the solution. Right now, I don't want to ruin it for anyone that actually wants to try to figure it out. There's a second exercise, as I said. This one, again, has a CSP that's kind of pre-programmed for the exercise. If you go and take a look at it, you can see here, there's not a lot of complexity there. It's got a script coming from, I will probably add some more CSP there just for the sake of obfuscating what the answer is, but it may have something to do with that CDN. And yeah, so you got this, there's a way to get a cross-site scripting execution on this one. And if you do that, although I'm cheating and just doing it in the console, if you do that, it will tell you up here, congratulations on solving the exercise. Probably I should do something more prominent, but that's what's there for now. Yeah, so that's kind of it. Those are the tools. Those are the things I came up with for the particular items that I was having trouble explaining. Normally, I don't rush through them like this. I do more background with developers. But I'll end up doing like 45 minutes probably just on core stuff with them, and 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I often get them for a couple of days when I do those training classes. But I don't want to drag everyone out here through a bunch of extra content at the end of the day. But if you got questions about cores or CSP stuff or CSRF or really anything else, web app security related or API testing related, definitely hit me up on Twitter. I'm happy to at least give my perspective on those. I don't know everything. I've been around long enough to learn a bunch of things, but I don't know everything. So with that, I'm going to switch back over to the slide that's got the GitHub repo. There we go. And there it is. It's got my Twitter. It's got the GitHub repo. There's a public Slack channel. It's one of the few that I actually hang out in, and it's our company one, but it's public and free, and anybody can join and chat there. So you can always hit me up there as well. I'm lurking in there every workday. And there's the GitHub repo for this project. So certainly, I mean, feel free to hop in there, play around with stuff. You'll see there are stubs in there for an OAuth implementation as well, but they're not ready to go. There's a lot of work to do on those still. There's another one of those topics that's difficult to explain. I think the common element that I found for explaining stuff was I really struggled when it was something where the context kept changing during the flow of the kind of event. So you're trying to explain something that happens in a certain chronological order, and the context keeps shifting. You go from code on the page in JavaScript to the native JavaScript interpreter in the browser to the server, and then come back again, and it hits the native interpreter in the browser, and it's that sort of stuff that gets murky with people, I think. And so that's kind of the type of interaction that I've been targeting for making some better learning aids, some better demos, and stuff for showing. It's pretty much it for me. So thanks everyone who stuck around to the end. Thank you everyone again who put the conference together, let me speak at it. It's been actually, I don't think I spoke anywhere in 2019. I didn't submit anywhere. And so it's just been interesting trying to get my feet wet again. But it's been a great day of learning, and I really appreciate it.